Hi everyone and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Erin.
And I guess when we look back in a few years' time, we'll probably find that some of the major news stories of 2018 related to kind of stuff that happened with the Koreas.
Yes, that is true. Or Donald Trump. But they're kind of intertwined.
In some ways, yes. Because, of course, he had his own meeting with Kim Jong-un.
Shortly after the two Koreas
a month
met.
or so. Yeah, there were a couple of meetings. Our article today is all about the first actual meeting between Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un. And it's kind of continued on since then. And anybody who's been paying attention for the last couple of months, there's been sort of... The summit was on with Trump, it was off with Trump, they were getting on, they were saying all bad things about each other. You never really know how this one's going to go.
No, and you know what? You still kind of don't.
No.
It's just, hopefully things don't end in nuclear disaster.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that if the two Koreas were kind of left to sort it out between themselves, they may arrive at a few happy results.
But I think we're too far gone for that.
We're too far gone that.
Yeah.
No, you've got the US in there.
Yeah.
I mean, China, to be fair, are also plenty in there.
And Russia and Iran.
Yeah,
so.
it's the whole world is like a big ball of string that's been tangled together, and you can't kind of pull free one string.
No.
What we can do, however, is, as I said, go back to that meeting, that first meeting between the two Korean presidents or leaders when some stuff was said and, you know, it seemed like things would be going well. It took a lot of people by surprise when it happened.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I didn't expect it, but kind of looking back sort of over the time that this happened now, I've had mixed feelings about it. First, I thought maybe the North's sort of concession to some things was a trick. And then I was like, oh, maybe they actually just like, they're all too poor to feed themselves.
Yeah,
and, like,
they need a bit of help here.
Yeah, so you just don't really know. And we're actually going to talk about that in today's article.
Exactly. So let's read through it and cast your minds back to this April and what went on. South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un met at the border between the Koreas on April 27, 2018. It was the first meeting between the two men and the first between the leaders of the respective nations in 11 years. They signed the Panmunjom Declaration, in which both agreed to seek an end to the Korean War and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Relations between the two Koreas have been thawing for months. Examples of this were seen at the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea. In the women's ice hockey event, the two Koreas were represented by a single team made up of athletes from both nations. The games were also attended by Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister. North Korea later invited Moon to a meeting, ultimately leading to the April summit. In addition to working toward ending the Korean War and getting rid of North Korea's nuclear weapons, Moon and Kim agreed to promote balanced economic growth. This clause in the Panmunjom Declaration, as well as a remark by Kim about North Korea's poor transit infrastructure, has led experts to speculate about why the summit took place. It's hard to know anything for sure about North Korea due to the country's secretive nature. However, economic sanctions by the United Nations, the US, and even China are thought to be taking their toll. It's theorized that Kim wants to use economic growth, rather than nuclear might, as a way to keep his people happy. If that's the case, these summits and better cooperation with other countries are the North's only real option. Only time will tell how events on the Korean Peninsula will play out.
Okay, so a lot to talk about in there.
A lot of words for me to mispronounce as well.
Yeah, denuclearization.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I said that as cleanly as I could have. We'll get there again.
We'll have another go. All right, well, let's start today's article by taking a look at the title. which is Korean leaders meet in historic summit. A very good summary right there. A summit is an important meeting or a set of meetings between top officials of a country, so the presidents, their top leaders, their top executives, that sort of thing. They sort of all come together and have a series of meetings for a certain purpose. It can be different purposes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Could be peace talks, could be economic agreements,
Right.
could be, we're kind of in a problem, we need to solve it.
Right.
Something like that.
So, of course, we see that the two Korean leaders are meeting here, and it is historic because, as we see in the first sentence, or a couple sentences in, it's the first meeting between the two men.
And the country's leaders have met before.
Right.
Previous supreme leaders and previous presidents have met. And kind of sadly, those meetings may have looked promising, but they didn't really end up leading to much.
No.
Which is why everyone is kind of vaguely a little bit optimistic, but also cautious about this one.
Right.
Because we've kind of been here before.
Yeah, not getting your hopes up too much.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's find out a bit about who these people are. So we have the South Korean President, Moon Jae-in, and, of course, the North Korean Supreme Leader, Kim Jong-un. And they met at the border between the Koreas, which is sometimes familiarly called the DMZ.
Yes.
On April 27th this year.
Now, DMZ is demilitarized zone.
That's right.
So it's an area where army, basically, apart from the border guards, you can't have troops, you can't have weapons factories. It's just like a safe area between the two countries.
Exactly.
And you can't, if they go in it, then that's like, okay, you've kind of broken a rule here.
Yeah, that's a big no-no in the Koreas.
Yeah.
All
but
right.
you can actually visit it. One of
can,
our
yes.
co-workers upstairs has been there.
Yes, it is a good place to visit as long as you follow all the rules.
Yeah.
If you don't...
A weird thing I've heard about it is because there are no people living there, like the ecology, the animals, the wildlife has kind of become its own special area.
Interesting.
Unlike anywhere else because it's like growing wild.
Chernobyl or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
All right, so back to some of the English in the article. We've got a couple of words to look at here.
So the first one is supreme, and supreme is an adjective that basically means that if you're describing a person with this, they have the highest position of power possible or just of importance or influence. So basically, it's another way of giving someone a title like president in the US and Taiwan would mean the person with the highest or most amount of power. In North Korea, it's, of course, supreme leader. It's another way of saying the greatest possible.
Yeah, the top person, the number one.
Yeah.
And they met at the border between the Koreas. A border is usually a line separating one country or state or even a county from another. Now, often you can see a line because it's a river or a sea. Taiwan's borders are basically the water, same with England. But the border could also be a marked out line. I've
Just
been
on
to
a map.
Yeah, and sometimes you can't see them. You're not really sure. Like there's parts between England and Scotland where it's marked, like, okay, you are now in Scotland. At other times you wouldn't actually know. You could just walk across it and you wouldn't be aware.
Of course, with Canada and the US, that is almost always the case. But there are some interesting cases of buildings along the border where one half of a library will be in Canada and the other half will be in the US. So
exactly.
Interesting way to look at that.
Yeah, so we've got this line and they met around the line and they both crossed over to the other side. So Moon goes into the north and Kim comes over in the south. They did a handshake and they did photo opportunities and a few things like that. This all happened kind of as the meeting got underway.
Right. Okay, so this, like we said, was the first meeting between these two men. And, of course, other leaders from South and North Korea have met. But this is actually the first between the leaders of the respective nations in 11 years. Now, we used the adjective respective in that sentence to show that different things belong to each separate person or thing mentioned. So one is from the leader of South Korea, one is from the leader of North Korea, and we always use it in front of a plural noun. So we're talking about multiple things, and each of them has something different.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first time they've met in 11 years, the leaders from these two countries, which is quite significant.
Yeah, and it's a hopeful sign. You know, it's everything's better if we kind of talk to each other and figure out the differences. Now, I believe there are some sort of like communications between the two countries, but not face-to-face meetings like this.
Yeah.
So when they met and they had a talk, and then we see they signed the Panmunjom Declaration. Panmunjom is a village right near the border. It's basically kind of become sort of a word for the border area. And in this declaration, they both agreed to seek an end to the Korean War and I'll try again, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
All right.
So a declaration, this is an official document that contains one or more official statements declaring the intention of something or declaring what has been decided. And it's all kind of written out in a very official way, saying this is who we are and this is what we agree to try to do.
Yes.
This is our purpose. It's like a statement saying these are our goals.
Except very, very official.
Yes, super official.
So in this declaration, there were some promises made on both sides. They both agreed to, one, seek an end to the Korean War, which of course has been going on for nearly 70 years? 70
yeah,
years?
I mean, they haven't been actually fighting for that long, but it never officially ended after there was a ceasefire in like the 50s. 53, was it? When they stopped actually fighting, but the war was never officially ended.
Yes. So that is one of the goals here of this declaration, to end this war, and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
That way better than I did.
All right, I've been practicing in my head.
Okay.
So
what does it mean?
Denuclearization is the act of disarming and removing nuclear weapons from an area. Okay, so obviously if you have been paying attention to world news in the fairly recent past and even just more current news in general, you will know that the area of water and land around North and South Korea have nuclear weapons, both from the US and from North Korea who has been building them. So the idea is basically of removing that area of all nuclear weapons completely. And that goes for the US as well as North Korea, which could be a bit tricky.
Could be difficult. But everyone get rid of your nuclear weapons. And on this peninsula, a peninsula is an area of land, and it's kind of a long piece of land that kind of comes off from the mainland. So in this case, it's the mainland of Asia, and the peninsula is the sort of bit that sort of points out and goes down. A peninsula could be very small. If you think of the ones right at the bottom of Taiwan, that's not particularly long, but the Korean one contains essentially two whole countries. So
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next paragraph here and kind of find out what sort of led to this summit. So
yeah, it didn't just happen completely out of nowhere.
Which would have been very shocking, actually. All right, so it says here, relations between the two Koreas have been thawing for months. Relations, just sort of what happens in a relationship, the way that you talk to each other, the way that you communicate, the way you sort of act with each other. And they've been thawing. So what we mean here by thaw is that something is becoming friendlier and less formal. Now, thaw is usually used as a verb to say what happens when you take something frozen out of the cold and let it warm up. And you'll see the ice melt and it kind of gets softer, and maybe it's something that you're going to cook with, and then once it's
Or
thawed,
even at the end of winter when the ice kind of on the rivers goes away and the snow disappears and the flowers come out.
Right.
And we use it metaphorically to kind of mean two people are getting friendlier and warmer to one another.
Right. Their relationship isn't as strict as it was before.
Yeah. We'll look about some examples of how this started to happen in a moment. Right now, we're just going to take a short break. Welcome back, everyone. So we're looking at how the relations between the two Koreas were thawing in the lead up to this big summit. And one example of this, and in fact several, was seen at the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea, which was around February, sort of Chinese New Year time. There were quite a few things. There were visitors, there were official visitors, and as we see here, in the women's ice hockey event, the two Koreas were represented by a single team of athletes from both nations. They're made up of athletes from both nations. So ice hockey, that's more your department.
I was looking this up in the dictionary yesterday and realized that ice hockey is not really a Canadian way of describing it. We usually just call it hockey.
Yeah, I've let my Britishness out here. We have what you would call field hockey on grass, which we just call hockey, but we call it ice hockey.
Well, we also have field hockey, but we call it field hockey.
Yeah, so it's basically which country calls it what. So a little bit of British English in there because I wrote it, but it's the sport on ice where you hit a puck into goals and crash into each other, and it's all very big and physical.
They're both correct anyways.
Yes.
So really fun game. If you know where to look, you can go find an ice hockey game here in Taiwan.
Yep, I've been to see one. It was a lot of fun.
All right.
But the two Koreas, instead of having a team from the north and a team from the south in the women's event, they joined together. And so the team was represented by players from both sides. If you're representing something, in this case, it means to be part of a sports event or a part of a team, and you are playing for your country. You are saying, we are the best people in our country and we're on this team, so we are our country for the purposes of this game.
Right, exactly. Okay, so another thing that was seen at the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang was that the games were also attended by Kim Yo-jong, who is Kim Jong-un's sister. Okay, so...
And she's pretty influential.
Yes, she has a pretty important role up there in North Korea, and that was a pretty big deal, actually, to have her there.
An actual member of the Kim family who's very close to Kim Jong-un himself and has a lot of influence and power and so on. So, yeah, it was a big thing for her to come.
Right.
And this then led to North Korea later invited Moon to a meeting, and then this ultimately led to the April summit.
Right.
Ultimately is an adverb used to kind of mean in the end, sort of the very last thing that happened.
Okay, so we saw in the first paragraph here what was sort of included in this declaration, but once they sort of had this April summit and agreed to do this, they sort of said, let's end the Korean War, let's find a way to do that, let's find a way to denuclearize the Korean peninsula.
See, it's not so easy.
Yeah, but they also agreed to promote balanced economic growth. Now, by balanced, we just mean that it's sort of going to affect or impact both countries in the same way. Sort of balance, instead of South Korea having all of this money and wealth and North Korea having nothing, sort of balancing that out.
Yeah, they both grow, they both build, they exchange a few things, and both sides benefit.
Right. And so they're going to try to find this balanced economic growth. Now, the adjective economic, it just relates to industry, the trading of money, the management of money. So when you think of economic policies, it's something that a country might do to help their country make money or give people their jobs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we also did see the phrasal verb get rid of nuclear weapons, and that goes back to our crazy long word denuclearization, which means getting rid of nuclear weapons. If you get rid of something, you throw it away, basically. You make sure you don't have this thing anymore. You get it gone.
Throw them in the trash.
Yep.
Very safely.
Very safely in a way that they won't damage people or poison the environment.
Yes.
But there are hopefully ways to do it. It's just not that easy.
Okay. All right. So...
Economic growth.
Economic growth.
Or economic, you can say it both ways. But this was something that people picked up on in the media. This was something that a few experts looked at.
Okay, now we are going to lead into that idea here by saying this clause in the Panmunjom Declaration, as well as a remark by Kim about North Korea's poor transit infrastructure, has led experts to speculate about why the summit took place. Now, here's kind of where we're going to start thinking about why this is happening now.
Why now?
Right. So we talked about the clause, promote balanced economic growth. Now, a clause is a part of a written legal document or a written law that sort of covers a particular subject of one bigger whole. So if this declaration is about how we can sort of do these things, this is one specific part of the things we want to do, basically.
Like, if you had a rent contract, one clause would be about, like, you can't have pets. Or you must give 1 month's notice before you move out. Something like that. So there was this clause. So basically, we agree to balanced economic growth. Now, there was also a remark that Kim Jong-un made. A remark is something that someone or says or could be right to express an opinion or an idea. It's a comment. Now, this was something he said during the discussions, during the recorded bit that was later reported in the news. It was a remark. It was also a complaint. He basically kind of said, North Korea, my country, our transit infrastructure is poor. It's not very good, or it's certainly not as good as the South's. So what does he mean by this?
Okay, so poor transit infrastructure. So transit is sort of the process of moving things and people from one place to another. So when we're saying this word, we can think of MRTs, subways, trains, roads, these sort of things, buses, bridges. So, and infrastructure is sort of like the basic systems and structures that make up a city and country. So when we think of that, we think of roads, we think of
bridges,
buildings, bridges, airports, things that people use and need in daily life, right? Sewers, all that stuff.
So what he's saying is, our trains aren't that great. Maybe our roads aren't great. Things don't always run on time. And he's kind of saying this isn't the best situation, which is interesting because you wouldn't expect this kind of leader, this kind of politician to mention that.
Right. Especially considering how secretive they are. This is an interesting comment to let loose. Now, I imagine it wasn't by accident.
No, these things don't tend to, or if it was, it's just so random and very kind of bizarre. But it got the experts, the people who know a lot about the history and the politics of this issue, to speculate about why the summit took place and, as we said, why now. To speculate means to make an educated guess. You're sort of guessing and saying what you think, but you're basing that on some evidence or some past historical stuff to kind of inform your decision.
Right. So I can make a guess of anything I want, but I'm not a North Korea expert or a South Korea expert or a US expert. And so my guess is maybe not so much speculation as just sort of like fly on the wall pure guesses. But when you speculate, you need to have some previous sort of knowledge that gives you the reason to sort of think that.
Bit of logic in the guess kind of thing.
All right. So, of course, like we did just talk about, it's hard to know anything for sure about North Korea because the country is so secretive. It has a secretive nature. Now, a secretive person or a secretive organization or a country or something like that likes to keep their thoughts, intentions, and actions hidden from others. Maybe for different reasons.
Different reasons, but could be so that they don't want to show weakness because they feel like they're kind of, if not at war, then at least kind of in a state of being enemies with other people. And in North Korea's state, they don't really want its own people to know about the outside world and the outside world to know about its own people. They want to control the stories that come in and out of the country. So that's one thing we don't really know, but economic sanctions by the United Nations, the US and China, even China, because it's kind of a surprise. China are allies with North Korea. But these sanctions are thought to be taking their toll. Sanctions, particularly economic sanctions, are measures that are taken by one country or a group to sort of force another to kind of follow an agreement or follow some rules, basically by saying, we're not going to let you trade these things. We're not going to let you bring in these things. We're not going to let you sell these things. They put a whole load of different rules and limits on what they can do economically again in order to sort of basically make the country feel like we can't run properly while these are in place. And so the only thing we can do is agree to what the people forcing the sanctions want in order for things to happen again.
Right. Okay. Now, of course, again, if you've been paying attention to North Korea, you will know that North Korea's had sanctions on it for many, many years, and now they're taking their toll. So what's happening is they're getting so many sanctions these days that even the government seems having a hard time. Before, they spent all their money on nuclearization, and their sort of citizens lost out, and now it seems like it's taking their toll everywhere. Now, what that means, take a toll, is to have had a very bad effect on something or someone over a long period of time. So what it means is their money's running out. They're not able to import or well, I don't know if they export very much, but
coal, but even China stopped taking their coal.
Exactly. So they're not able to import food. They're not able to import
electricity,
other things, electricity and clothing and that sort of thing. And so basically everyone in the country is suffering.
Kind of missing out. And it's theorized, or the theory is that Kim wants to use economic growth rather than nuclear might as a way to keep his people happy. So if something is theorized, it's kind of like, this is our opinion. We haven't quite got proof, but this is our working idea that we'll base on. And what the idea is that Kim and his father and his grandfather, they often use kind of, we're a powerful country, we've got a big army, we've got nuclear weapons, and we can defend ourselves and fight. And that made the local people in North Korea sort of feel proud, feel happy, and feel okay with the Kim family being in charge. Now, it's theorized that this maybe isn't working anymore, and maybe, we don't know about it, but maybe people are more unhappy, and the Kim family doesn't feel as secure in power.
Right.
So the feeling is, well, if we give people economic growth, more jobs, more buildings, more money, more stuff, they will feel happy and will get to continue being the supreme leaders.
Right. And if you can't feed your soldiers, you won't have soldiers.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, if this is the case, obviously it is just a theory, but if it is the case, these summits, like the one in April and the one between the U.S. president and Kim Jong-un, and better cooperation with other countries are the only real option. So the only real way forward. Now, cooperation is when you work with someone to achieve something that you both want. So you're working together to get something that benefits both of you, or the willingness to sort of work with other people.
Give a little, get a little.
Right. So North Korea is sort of infamous for not working with other people, and that might need to change now.
Yeah, they may need to get rid of their nuclear weapons in order to start trading and growing as an economic kind of country. But of course, we don't really know what's going to happen. It's kind of gone this way before and then not gone this way. Right. So the concluding sentence is, only time will tell how events on the Korean peninsula will play out. To play out means to kind of happen in real time. It's just sort of how events will progress, what will happen next kind of feel. So we don't know exactly what will happen next. Trump and Kim, they had their summit. They said some things and agreed some things. Has it quite happened yet? Not quite, but, you know, these things do take, you know, these things are measured in months and years, not weeks and days. So we will have to see maybe this time in a year's time, then we'll know a bit more how things have gone. So we don't quite know yet. We will have to see. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our News Digest article. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. For English Digest, I'm Pat.
And I'm Erin.
We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.